You'll see some of this back up here. Next, I'd like to talk a little about, see, I told you there were going to be surprises. You've got the free gift. There we go. Next, in the slides, you'll see a lot of the living theater. And in a way, you know, I grew up in the living theater, and I feel that people who grew up in a Baptist family, I mean a good family, I don't mean some kind of, you know, racist, lunatic, right-wing militarist family. I mean just a good, honest, hard-working, all-American Baptist family in the heartland of America. How on earth did you come to understand all these concepts of tolerance and care for the earth and all these things that we've been talking about as countercultural attributes? Me, I got it handed to me on a paper plate. Yeah. And as the Living Theater opened in my living room, in Julian and Judith's living room performing, and then they moved to the Cherry Lane Theater in Lower Manhattan, which is where they did their first sort of professional theater performances in a space like this. And then they moved to a loft up on 100th Street, where they began to produce these tremendous poetic plays. Originally, they were a poetic theater. They said everything should be poetry, everything should be beautiful. And all the plays were in verse, incredible. But in those times, in the early 1950s, they got more and more political because of what was happening, the McCarthy era, and the understanding that the affluent America was not exactly delivering to the poor, the downtrodden, the minorities. They began to become more and more political, and they opened this spectacular theater on 14th Street where they did the great plays, the Connection, the Brig, that are still with us, still being performed. And as a result of the politics of that, the IRS and the government conspired to bust them, and close it down. And that has been written about by Julian, my father, and written about by Judith, my mother, and written about by me in here from the eyes of the 14-year-old who watched that bust come down. And by then, I was aware enough to have a good idea of exactly what was happening and its causes and what was going on. And after that, the company left the United States and went to Europe on tour for a number of reasons. The number one reason really was by being, while the court case dragged on about the closure of the theater, the number one reason why they went to Europe was because over there they could work and perform out from under the threat of governmental aggression and oppression towards the company. And that leads me to tell you, by early summer, the theater company had departed for Europe, where, at that time, they could work paying far less in U.S. taxes and be secure from political harassment, while the lawyers began a long paper argument over whether the Living Theater had been unfairly singled out for prosecution by the United States government. This was the start of what was to become a very long tour. It caravanned itself across several continents and dozens of countries, cultures, and languages. It kept the theater on the move for more than 20 years. After a while, it seemed less like a tour and more like an exile. Pilgrims playing to the footlights in a dozen different languages, in 1,000 different theaters, in the capitals of Europe, in the souk markets of North Africa, in the 5th largest town in Finland, and ultimately into the streets, the hospitals, the asylums, the favelas, the inner cities. This tour was a long way from the theater crowd of New York's Broadway or London's West End. It was a very long way as well from the artsy stages of Off-Broadway and Greenwich Village. when I first caught up with the Travelers after living out the school season in the home of my energetic grandmother, Mabel Beck, who had volunteered to watch over me while, in her words, my parents ran away from home. When I first caught up with the tour, the company was inhabiting a marvelous wood-floored Italian villa in Velletri, just an hour's drive from Rome. The wooden flooring stands out, since long ago the forests of Italy were all cut down and stone flooring became the rule. So this wood-floored villa had a genuine elegance to it. My arrival there sticks in my mind like a boat from the Middle Ages going over the falls at the edge of the Renaissance. Beyond the entranceway of the villa into the Great Hall, purple and golden lights flashing, exotic electrical musical notes swooning from guitars, people in the huge living room dancing slowly, wearing soft, wide, velvet clothes patterned in the most bright colors. It was June of 1965. In the big kitchen, a few of the actors were preparing an evening meal for everyone, speaking in Dutch, Italian, German, French, English, communicating with each other in an easy hodgepodge of words and gestures. Clearly, not all of these people were in the theater company that had left New York just a few months ago. The expansive villa with its large rooms and many chambers was an ideal place for the living theater to hole up and rehearse. But more than just that, it was an ideal place for the friends of the theater, other artists, performers, musicians, and political sympathizers to come and not simply visit for a day, but to bed down and to become part of the process the living theater was itself becoming. A community process, a collective process, a clan, a tribe of artists, an arts culture alive and budding. The music wafted up the great wood staircase and through the rooms above. There was a property nearby which belonged to a convent. The nuns' field was blazing with bright red poppies. Soon, the season was ripe for the nuns to work the field, and they did, harvesting the poppy ooze, moving up and down the slope, hunching over in their habits. In the ancient manner of tithing, they left the edges of the field alone, and when the nuns had concluded their harvest for the season, quickly the townsfolk made their way to the edges of the field to harvest what they could, and the theater folk went too. It was the common thing to do, and though it wasn't a talked about issue in the town, it was the way the people got a little for their own use. We let the razor-gotten scrapings dry out in small metal candy drop tins. After a few days, there was enough to smoke some of the stuff at night around the yellow light of the kitchen, inhaling the sweet, aromatic vapors. On a regular schedule, the company was preparing and rehearsing the new plays in the villa's large open rooms. Frankenstein, an adaptation of Mary Shelley's epic brought to modern life on a monstrously huge stage set, which became the monster's head itself, and a 3-story tall monster grown from the police state of modern times, threatening the audience. And the other new play was Mysteries, actually titled Mysteries in Smaller Pieces, in which the company enacted rituals and visions, seeking to draw the audience into an inner space, a space of enigma and wonder. Further along the tour, the company acquired VW minibuses, or vans as they're now called, to travel the European landscape. But before the vans, we went by train. So we departed the sweet hillside town, driving to Rome's rail station and embarking by train for the next shows. At each new town, we lugged luggage to our pensione, a sort of small hotel where everyone stays. Then we were off to rehearse. In one city, some friends of the producer want to make a recording of the audio from one of the scenes of the new plays. They arranged for us to meet at a studio where a small sound recording system is set up. This particular scene had been brought to the company as a theater exercise, which had been learned in India. First, we all stood in a ring. Then extended our arms over each other's shoulders, forming a tight circle of people, held close by each other. Bill Sharry, a scientist turned actor, explained what to do next. Just listen to the silence. Then listen to the breath of the person next to you. Feel their breathing. Hear the sound it makes. Listen to the rhythm of their breathing and bring the sound of it into yourself. Feel it and breathe out the sound you hear. Sounded like mighty strange instructions to me. Bill went on, don't hum, don't sing, don't try to make a pretty sound or an unpretty sound. Just breathe and listen and breathe again. And when you hear and feel the sound inside of you, let your breath bring it out. We got very quiet. For a long time, all I could hear was people breathing. Then slowly, very slowly, I heard a deep, slow sound from around me, as though the hidden gears of a slow-moving, gigantic machine were turning, creaking along. The sound rose through the throats surrounding me, and I felt the sound from the left and right drawn into me and my own breath. It was easy then, just to let the sound out on the next breath. And I felt that slow, deep sound pass through me and out into the room, joining the others. Another breath, and I was letting it happen as naturally as though I had done this or heard this before. There was a rumbling harmony I seemed to be part of, that I was helping to make, but that came from somewhere before or beyond or within or around me, like the turning of some immense gear or the axis of the earth. The sound I was drawing from my nearest companions and that they were drawing from theirs seemed to come and go round and round the circle through all of our lungs and out, upwards, and surrounding us like a reverberating chord, propelling us toward deeper, fuller breaths and resounding higher, like a bell-like chime, like 100 bells at once, like the hum inside the hive, like the sound of all the leaves of fall crackling, like the waves on all the shores crashing at once, more sounds than I could name in one clear unity of pitch and tone and harmonic beauty. Slowly, the sound came down, quieted, became softer, just a shade, a shadow of what it was. Then softly, like a whisper of lovers coming to sleep in each other's arms, quiet came round us again. "Did you turn the recording tape on?" asked a voice. When I returned to the United States, I heard about this thing, this chanting again. I heard it called an om, but the theater always called it a chord. And when I heard about it in the U.S., it was always with some kind of guru up in the front of a class leading the chants, one breath sound at a time, or a group of people sitting cross-legged apart from each other, like in classroom school rows, doing 3 long chanted om breaths, or something like that. Never as intense as the arms over shoulders, holy donut of voices in celestial harmonies. The theater used this chord in the new play Mysteries, in a scene following a Jackson Maclow poem called Street Songs. Julian would sit at the center stage, lit by a single small spotlight, and intone the lines to Jackson Maclow's poem, lines which reflected the populist social causes of that era. And after some time, actors and actresses sitting among the audience would join in, echoing those lines. Slowly, we would come join Julian on the stage, first walking in a circle together, then joining hands, arms, forming the circle, coming to the stillness, and finally joining together in the chord. It was always one of the most memorable moments in the theater. Sometimes whole parts of the audience would rise to the occasion, coming on stage too, putting their arms over the shoulders of those in front of them and lending their voices to the swell of the sound. The theater has gone on since that time right up until today, and has recently performed in migrant camps and in the last month or month and a half in Mexico, and over the last year in Norway, in Brazil, in places around the world, and they are continuing to perform. And right now, my friends, from the Living Theater, my friends from the Living Theater, just returned from tour, will present a short performance, Living Theater Snapshots.